I was the quiet brother, until my brother put me by the trash after I paid for his party. So I left the bill unpaid, told her fiancé everything. I'm Lucas. I'm 36 now. I've always been the most dependable of all my siblings. Never the top selection, never the troublemaker, never the one praised, just the person who arrived on time, paid his own way, and remembered everyone's birthdays. I have a job in finance. I live by myself and avoid drama. My relatives are loud, extremely attached in a phony way, and professionals at pretending everything is wonderful while avoiding actual problems. I was constantly present but never genuinely welcomed. The type of individual invited to weddings but not included in group shots. When we were kids, my brother, Jason, was treated like a celebrity. He was daring, thoughtless, and always doing something risky. He always turned out okay. This arrogant assurance. My parents adored it. Even after he dropped out of college, lost job after job, and returned to their house at the age of 30, they still referred to him as a genius. Meanwhile, I worked my way through university, stayed in the same job for nearly a decade, and even helped cover their mortgage payments when Dad's work hours were decreased. However, none of this appeared to be significant. It never gave me a significant role in the household. I pretended it didn't upset me, at least that is what I told myself. I remained silent, continued to give money, answered their calls, returned home for the holidays, and smiled through the small barbs disguised as jokes. Lucas, why are you so tense? It's just a get-together. Oh, we figured you were working. You always are. I let it go. Some part of me hoped that if I kept showing up, they'd eventually treat me like I belonged, rather than the person behind the scenes footing the money. That fantasy fell apart last October. It all began with dinner. Jason had recently proposed to Lauren, whom my mother immediately adored and referred to as an angel. My parents had planned a large supper at a posh rooftop restaurant in the city, far beyond their typical budget, which I now know should have been my warning. Mom called me a few weeks ago. Lucas, sweetheart, she whispered in that charming tone she employs when she wants help. We'd really love it if you came to Jason and Lauren's engagement celebration. It's going to be such a wonderful evening, I replied without hesitation. Just let me know the time and place. Her tone softened. Also, if you don't mind, could you cover the booking just to lock it in? We'll pay you back soon. I should have realized then that "we'll pay you back" meant I'd be covering it indefinitely. But, as always, I agreed. I phoned the facility, reserved a private location for 20 guests, and paid the deposit using my credit card. I didn't feel bitter. It was Jason's big moment, and I was hoping to truly feel included this time. On the night of the meal, I arrived at precisely 7 p.m. I dressed in a dark blue suit, pressed shirt, cufflinks I had saved for months, and carried a fine champagne bottle as a gift. I even created a personalized card with their initials on it. When I reached the rooftop, the woman in front nodded and directed me to the private portion. I paused, took a breath, and then stepped in. The place looked fantastic. Tiny lights above, flower arrangements on each table, and mellow jazz playing close. Everyone had already arrived: my parents, Jason, Lauren, her family, and their close friends. They were laughing, having beverages, and conversing. I strolled over with a smile, expecting for a friendly greeting. Jason turned and gave me the same arrogant expression. "Oh hey," he remarked casually, without even looking at the bottle in my hand. "Glad you showed up." Then he pointed to a foldable chair wedged beside a trash can. "Not many seats left, sorry. This table is for family," he said, seeming to be sorry. "But you've got a spot over there." I literally froze. I assumed he was being sarcastic. I turned and looked at Mom. She simply returned a faint, closed-mouth smile, the one she uses when she decides to remain silent. My father produced an unpleasant laugh and raised his drink. Lauren didn't lift her head, and a few others chuckled in unison. I stood still for a second too long. I intended to say something, but nothing came out of my mouth. My ears burnt. It reminded me of when I was 13 and was left out of a family photo during my cousin's wedding because I didn't fit in. I went to the spare chair, set the champagne down on the floor, and sat by myself. My coat stayed on. A server approached me and inquired if I was a part of the event. I nodded without saying anything. He said nothing else, simply handed me a water glass and started walking. I sat calmly for almost 2 hours while everybody laughed, gave speeches, and exchanged gifts. I listened as my brother spoke for quite some time about how fortunate he was to be surrounded by individuals he cared about the most. Lauren referred to my mother as the best mother-in-law anyone could ask for, and I observed my mother become upset. Nobody even asked whether I wanted to place a dinner order. Dessert eventually arrived. A magnificent tiered cake adorned with glittering gold decorations. Soft music was played. The sun has set behind the skyline. I noticed no one had looked my way in half an hour. Then came the bill. I observed the waiter approach their table, bearing a leather case. He hesitated, examined the room, and then looked at the payment details. My credit card, I remembered. The waiter stepped up to me. "Pardon me, sir," he asked politely. "The total charge comes to $4,860. Would you like us to process the final amount on the same card?" Everyone turned their heads. Jason raised his brow. "Oh, right," he replied casually. "Lucas is covering it." The server stared at me straight. I smiled slowly and quietly. My voice did not shake. "I'm not with that group," I clarified, making sure everyone could hear. "They told me this section was reserved for relatives only." The entire room became silent. The air felt fractured. Jason's jaw dropped slightly open. Mom appeared puzzled. Dad sat upright. Lauren's father narrowed his eyes. The server appeared unsure. "But sir, you're the one who placed the booking." "I am," I said with a nod. "And I paid the deposit, but I wasn't seated with them. I was off on the side." I grabbed my coat, and looked at the garbage can beside the chair where they had seated me. You could almost hear everyone's mouths drop at once. Nobody moved. The waitress stood between the tables, holding the bill as if it were a bomb. Jason was astonished, as if someone had hit him with something icy. My mother's look shifted between me and the check, as if she couldn't believe how quickly things had gone bad. "Lucas, hold on," she urged in a quiet, uncertain tone. "What are you doing?" I lifted a shoulder. "Just sticking to the seating plan." Jason said the main table was for family only, so I assumed I didn't count. I turned to face the waiter. "I didn't eat. I didn't have anything to drink. I wasn't included, so I'm not footing the bill." "Don't be stupid," Jason exclaimed. His phony grin shifted into something sharper. "It was a joke. You always act like it's life or death." The entire place had become silent. Even the jazz band had slowed to a faint, uncomfortable hum. All eyes were fixed on me, and for once, I didn't cower. "That's the issue," I responded softly. "You all think it's funny. As long as someone else is the punchline." Lauren was disoriented, as if she had suddenly understood something important was happening. Her father, who had been quiet the entire night and was rigid in his blazer, stared at Jason. "You invited him to your engagement dinner and sat him near the garbage," he said, surprised. Jason scoffed and looked to our mother for encouragement. She straightened up and mustered a grin. "Let's not make this a big deal. Lucas has always had a flair for drama." I nearly laughed. That was her favorite excuse. He is dramatic. He is weary. He takes things the wrong way. Any reason to avoid the truth, that what they tolerated was cruel, and they stood by while it occurred. The server cleared his throat. "Apologies again, but the restaurant needs to close out the event. If we can't use the original card, we'll need another method of payment." There were no voices heard. I turned and approached the elevator doors. My father eventually decided to talk. "Lucas, seriously, you already handled part of the cost. Might as well take care of the rest." I froze in place. That phrase shattered something within me. I gently turned around. "You're right, Dad. I did handle the initial payment. I contacted 3 different venues before choosing one with a rooftop like Jason requested. I arranged the date so it wouldn't clash with his football calendar. I selected real floral designs because Mom said fake ones would ruin the photos. I paid the $1,000 non-returnable fee. I didn't even hesitate. I came dressed properly, arrived alone, and showed up for my brother. I came forward, my voice quiet but clear. And what did I get back? A collapsible chair next to trash bins, and a group of relatives who clearly don't see me as one of them. I faced Jason immediately. "So now it's your turn to handle it. You and your actual family." Jason's skin went scarlet and spread up his neck. He stood up straight, attempting to appear scary, but it simply made him look foolish. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said calmly. "I'm setting limits." I turned and left. I bypassed the elevator and descended the steps. Each step was filled with amazement and racing adrenaline. I had accomplished something I had only dreamt possible. Outside, the crisp breeze hit my face like a cold slap. I untied the knot in my tie and resumed walking. I didn't have a destination. I only knew I wouldn't turn back. I assumed that was the conclusion. A brave exit. Perhaps a few awkward apologies thereafter. Perhaps someone is trying to smooth things over. But I didn't anticipate how profound the influence of that moment would be. Later that night, long after I had returned home, still dressed in my formal attire and cradling the unused bottle of champagne like a lifeless limb, my phone lit up. The first message came from Jason. "Bro? Really? Couldn't you have just paid and then talked?" Then one from Mom. "You made us appear horrible in front of Lauren's relatives. Was this vengeance?" Following that, an unidentified phone called. It was Lauren. "Hey," she said, her voice softer than I had ever heard. "I know we don't speak much, but can I ask something?" "Go ahead," I said cautiously. "Did you actually pay for everything? The down payment, the flowers, everything?" I halted. "Yes." There was silence on the other end. "Because they told my dad you volunteered, that it was your idea." That halted me in my tracks. "I didn't offer," I stated honestly. "They requested help. I agreed. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, and I wasn't expecting repayment. But I absolutely didn't come up with the idea." She breathed out a sigh. "Well, my dad is furious. He thought you did it as a nice gesture, but now he's saying he wouldn't have approved the restaurant if he knew the person covering the cost got seated beside garbage." I said nothing. "He said Jason and your parents made him look ridiculous." Another pause. "I'm not trying to get pulled into this," she immediately said. "I just thought you deserved to know." I thanked her and ended the call. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, the situation deteriorated more faster than I anticipated, and certainly not in the direction my family expected. It all started with the family group thread. The biggest one. The chat that only buzzes during holidays and birthdays, loaded with low-quality food photos, recycled greeting memes, and cheerful Friday greetings from Aunt Ashley. That thread had been entirely quiet since dinner. It suddenly came to life. "Mom. Lucas, we need to talk. Call me. Jason, you ruined things. For Lauren's family. You have to fix it. Dad. This has become ridiculous. Please apologize so that we can end this." I didn't respond because this wasn't about folding chairs. It was not about the dinner bill. Before all of that, I was treated as the go-to contact, the person who drove people about, the spare wallet. And now that I'd finally said no, they weren't sure how to react. Lauren's father exacerbated the situation, or improved it, depending on your perspective. He definitely did not tolerate public shame. According to a mutual link, Jason's friend Brian, who always treated me better than the rest, Mr. Whitman completely lost it the night after that supper. He funded Lauren's elite education, provided her with the resources to launch her advertising company, and reportedly went above and beyond to organize a refined, seamless engagement timeline, only to discover that the groom's relatives fabricated the payment story, degraded their own kin, and forced him to split the liquor expense after I refused to handle the rest. According to Brian, Lauren's father made a comment at breakfast the next morning that read something like, "If they disrespect their own flesh like this, what happens once you legally join them?" Brutal. Jason was crushed by the aftermath. All wedding planning froze instantly. Lauren withdrew to her apartment for clarity, and her wedding planning boards vanished from the internet. My mother, attempting to resolve the matter, sent a thorough email, not a brief note, not a phone call, a formal communication. The headline was just, "Please." The message content consisted of 5 lengthy lines full of sweetness and emotional bait. She stated she never meant to inflict grief, that she didn't realize I felt alone, and that it would be extremely beneficial to the family if I could meet with Jason and speak things through. However, the term apologize never appeared. Only lines like, "We didn't catch on. You got it twisted. Don't throw away all we've built over one night." I reread that last statement for a long time. What did we build? Was she alluding to the fact that I drove for 3 hours on December 24th to give presents since Jason, according to her, wasn't mentally prepared to shop? Or when I canceled my international vacation to Spain because Dad needed surgery and they couldn't afford a caregiver? Or the part where I didn't hesitate to co-sign the paperwork for their second vehicle, the same one Jason borrowed and never returned? I did not type an answer. I did not open the draft again. 2 days later, my mother's sister, Aunt Karen, called me. That stunned me. She was never warm or excessively nice, but she was direct. She managed a home design company and maintained a cool, professional demeanor. We hadn't spoken in over 12 months. Lucas, she answered. I found out what happened during the dinner. Obviously, I answered with a faint snark. I'm not calling to blame you, she explained right away. Actually, I'm glad. It was overdue. Someone had to speak up. That threw me off balance. She exhaled. I understand how your parents operate. Constantly hiding things beneath the surface, pretending perfection, but they've leaned on you far too long. And Jason, he's always acted like you're just background noise. Thanks, I replied softly. But why now? Because the Whitman family is now involved, she replied bluntly. And your mom is in full panic. She rang me yesterday and begged me to convince you to back down. I raised an eyebrow. And how did you respond? I told her you didn't require a lecture, you needed distance, and maybe it's time they figure out how to stand up without using you as support beams. That was the first time in my life that a family member genuinely acknowledged me. Not as a source of income or a safety net, but as a person. That night I got a message from Jason. Jason. Bro, Lauren's father just canceled the venue deposit. Said, we have different principles. You need to correct this. Help me out. Me. No. You deal with it. That was the light bulb moment. He still did not understand. He still saw me as a resource, a fallback, a living payment method. So I made my selection. I would fix something, but not what he was anticipating. That night, I opened a shared bank profile I had created around a year earlier, when Jason was unemployed and requested for assistance. He never turned it off. His streaming and fitness memberships remained connected. I deposited the remainder, roughly a couple $1,000s, to a private savings account I had established. It was a small sum, but it belonged to me. Money I hadn't touched in almost a year because I felt obligated to leave it there. Then I contacted the bank and properly closed the joint account. Jason tried to call me 4 times in a row the next morning. When I eventually responded, his voice was frantic. What the hell did you just pull? I did not respond. Bro, I had dinner plans with Lauren tonight. We were going to that restaurant she really likes, and now my card's getting declined. It says the account is gone. I'm aware, I replied. I shut it down. You did what? You can't just... I can, I responded evenly. And I already did. You made it clear I'm not part of the family, remember? So, if I don't belong at the table, you don't get to touch my money. He paused and then changed his tone. Dude, come on. This is petty. You're upset. Just admit it. You've always hated that people notice me more. You're just mad because Lauren's father sided with me. I chuckled. A real laugh. Oh, Jason, you honestly believe he's on your team? No response. Then I continued. Don't worry, you'll figure something out. You always manage to ask mom to get another card in your name or let Lauren's dad teach you what being responsible looks like. And then I ended the call. I had no idea what Jason did after that, but a few hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was not from him. Lauren sent a message. Email subject. Line. We should probably chat. I looked at the title for a while before opening it. The remark. We should probably talk felt like the prelude to something serious. I wasn't sure I was prepared for it, but curiosity and a desire for clarity compelled me to read it. It was longer than I anticipated, courteous, but profoundly personal. Structured like a formal letter, yet with emotion running through each sentence. She continued by stating that she now realizes how horrific that night was, and that she had not observed how terribly I was treated until things imploded. I was too focused on making everything picture perfect, she informed me, that I missed what was actually happening around me. She said that her father was outraged, not only because of the financial lies, but also because of the disrespect. He told me, if they can humiliate someone who gave their time, support, and money for the night, then I seriously need to rethink the family I'm marrying into. Lauren didn't hold back. She wrote that Jason tried to downplay everything, calling it a minor misunderstanding, but once her father received a copy of the full invoice from the restaurant manager, the truth began to emerge. Jason had informed her that I volunteered to cover the bills, that I preferred to sit alone since I was bashful, and that I had departed due to a work emergency. However, Lauren visited the restaurant herself. Yes, she confirmed that. And after chatting directly with the waiter, the whole tale unraveled. Then came the line that struck the hardest. I called off the engagement last night. I froze. She explained that it wasn't just about the dinner, The incident revealed a pattern of behavior she had previously overlooked. Jason's arrogance, dismissive attitude toward her, and how he talked behind my back. He kept telling me I was making too big a deal out of it, she said. But the truth is, you were the only one who showed any decency. She concluded with this. I'm not contacting you to bash Jason or drag you into drama. I just wanted you to know that I understand now and regret not realizing it sooner. I sat still, reading it several times. Not because I doubted it, but because I wasn't used to people believing my side. The family group chat went silent for several weeks. Jason called twice more, but I ignored both, and he gave up trying. Lauren returned the engagement ring, and her father formally canceled the venue and contacted all of the vendors. I learned from others that he had returned to her parents' home. Some of Jason's friends also vanished, and it appears that a few remained only to take advantage of his connection to Lauren's network. I assumed that was the conclusion, that everything would fade into silence. But then, one calm Sunday morning, someone knocked on my door. It was my mother. She stood outside on the porch, wrapped in a loose cardigan and holding a plastic container of lasagna as a symbolic gesture. Her eyes were swollen, and her makeup was barely applied. I didn't say anything. I simply unlocked the door slightly and waited. I made food for you, she mumbled. I did not take it. I want to have a conversation, she told me. No justifying. No blaming. That caught me off guard, and I stepped aside to let her in. She sat at the kitchen table, just like she did when I was younger. Her fingers twitched nervously, and she forced a smile, but there were no defensive lines this time. You're exhausted. He didn't mean it. She cleared her throat. I need to apologize. I crossed my arms. For only that. Her expression stiffened, but she gave a brief nod. You're correct. Probably for more than one reason. She took a breath. I didn't want to watch it. It wasn't invisible. I just chose to ignore it. Jason has always made a lot of noise. He captures everyone's attention. You've never complained. You simply handled whatever came your way. You were reliable. We started treating you like a solid object that we never expected to shatter. Do you know what the problem is with safety nets? I said. People only notice them after they collapse. Not while they are climbing. Her lower lip quivered slightly as she glanced at her hands. Your father and I were incorrect. We let Jason do whatever he pleased. We let him treat you as if you didn't matter. I didn't respond. I cannot reverse everything. And I know that bringing food and apologizing will not erase the years we went without noticing. But I needed you to hear it. I finally get it. And I regret it. I gazed at her for a while. And for once, she wasn't explaining it away. She wasn't covering for Jason. She wasn't telling me to move on or get over it. She was just acknowledging it. I nodded slowly. Thanks. We didn't say much after that. She left the meal. I accompanied her to the doorway. She didn't mention Jason. She didn't ask me to reach out. She just said, take care, and drove away. Things didn't repair right away, but they also didn't break apart. My parents began sending individual texts rather than group ones. They were quick and courteous. Later, my mother invited me to Thanksgiving. Only if you're comfortable, she wrote. I have not replied yet. According to what I've learned, Jason works part-time at a job he dislikes, lives rent-free, and probably avoids looking in mirrors. He hasn't phoned since, which is good with me. I started reading about emotional independence, family patterns, and inner quiet, and I finally took that postponed trip to Spain. I also invested in new headphones with active noise cancellation. I also started going to therapy, not because I was damaged, but because I recognized that healing does not require apologies. It begins when you look at yourself and think, you were worthy of more, so you gave it to yourself. No, I did not pay the bill that night, but I was eventually able to collect the sum that I had been owing for years. And for the first time, I'm not sitting close to the trash. I have taken my own seat.